Welcome to the Glass House, a home without walls, where life unfolds inside a transparent box. Built in 1949 by Philip Johnson, it's part masterpiece, part controversy. Is it radical honesty in architecture or an ego-driven stunt? Let's step inside and find out. Imagine living in a house where your entire life is on display. No walls, no curtains, no privacy. Just you, a glass box, and the world outside looking in. Some call it art, others call it madness. But for decades, one house in Connecticut has stood as the ultimate experiment in how far architecture can push the boundaries of human comfort. This is the Glass House, designed by the legendary architect Philip Johnson in 1949. At first glance, it looks simple. 4 walls of pure glass, a flat roof, and a fireplace core in the center. But beneath that minimal exterior lies one of the most controversial and influential buildings in modern American history. Is it a masterpiece of transparency, honesty, and design purity? Or is it a pretentious stunt? A billionaire's toy that no normal person could ever actually live in? And here's the bigger question. Does architecture owe us comfort? Or does it exist to challenge us? Today, we'll dive into the shocking story behind the Glass House, the scandal of its creation, the bizarre lifestyle of the man who lived there, and the never-ending debate about whether this building is genius or pure nonsense. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll see why this single house in New Canaan, Connecticut, still sparks arguments among architects, historians, and even psychologist Philip Johnson wasn't just an architect. He was a provocateur. Born in 1906 to a wealthy family, Johnson had the money, the education, and the ego to carve out a place for himself in architectural history. But here's the twist. For much of his career, he wasn't even considered a great architect. Critics often accused him of copying European modernists like Mies van der Rohe rather than innovating himself. But Johnson had something many architects lacked: flair for drama. He knew how to turn buildings into statements, and the Glass House was his boldest statement of all. When Johnson unveiled the project in 1949, he was only 43 years old. America was still recovering from World War II. Suburban neighborhoods were popping up across the country. Families wanted cozy, safe houses with picket fences and living rooms shielded from the neighbors. Johnson built the exact opposite, a transparent box that forced its residents to live like fish in a bowl. Why? Johnson once said, "Transparency is honesty. A wall is a lie." To him, removing walls wasn't just a design choice, it was a moral statement. But many thought it was ridiculous. After all, who actually wants to live with zero privacy? Even Johnson himself admitted that the Glass House was less about comfort and more about performance. It was a stage where architecture and his own ego could take center spotlight. And for decades it worked. The Glass House made Johnson a celebrity and cemented his reputation as America's master of architectural provocation. But behind the glamour lay controversy. Scandal at the foundation. When Johnson first proposed the Glass House, even his friends thought he'd gone too far. His mentor, the legendary Mies van der Rohe, had already designed the iconic Farnsworth House in Illinois, another glass-walled experiment. Many critics argued Johnson simply copied Mies's idea. Was the Glass House a masterpiece of originality or a cheap imitation dressed up with publicity? The controversy grew when details about Johnson's personal life emerged. In the 1930s, Johnson had flirted with fascist politics, even praising Nazi rallies before eventually renouncing those views. By the late 1940s, those scandals were still haunting him. For some, the Glass House was less a work of art and more an attempt to distract the public from his dark past. And then there was the issue of money. Johnson was independently wealthy, meaning he didn't have to worry about whether the Glass House was practical, affordable, or livable. He built it for himself, not for ordinary Americans. That raised a deeper question. Is architecture supposed to serve the people, or can it be pure self-indulgence? For Johnson, the answer was obvious. He lived in the Glass House until his death in 2005, but even his lifestyle there was bizarre. He shared the house with his longtime partner, art curator David Whitney. Yet both men admitted that the house often felt more like a museum than a home. Visitors came not to see them, but to see it. So was the glass house an act of architectural genius? Or just the world's most expensive glass cage? Step inside the glass house, and the first thing you notice is what's missing. Walls. Every corner of the 2,800 square foot interior is visible at all times. The bathroom? Hidden inside a central brick cylinder. The bedroom? Just a bed in plain sight. The kitchen? Barely there, more symbolic than functional. Living there meant every movement, every expression was exposed. There was no shutting a door, no hiding clutter, no escaping the gaze of whoever was outside. Even Johnson admitted it wasn't always comfortable. He once joked that the house was great for parties, but not for hangovers. Here's the controversy. Psychologists argue that constant exposure can create anxiety. Humans evolved to need private spaces, caves, rooms, walls. Without them, the brain never fully relaxes. Was Johnson's house a bold experiment in honesty or a dangerous denial of human psychology? Critics also noted the hypocrisy. While Johnson celebrated transparency in the glass house, he quietly built a second house on the property called the Brick House. Unlike its transparent twin, this structure had no windows at all. Guests often stayed there, and Johnson himself retreated there for privacy. In other words, even the man who invented radical transparency couldn't fully live by it. This duality sparked endless debates. Was Johnson mocking us? Was the glass house just an intellectual game? Or was it perhaps a metaphor for the human condition, that we crave openness yet always need to hide? For Johnson, the glass house wasn't just a home. It was a gallery. Over the years, he filled it with carefully chosen art pieces, furniture, and sculptures. Every chair, every painting, every object was placed to be seen. Guests described visiting not as entering a home, but as stepping into a curated performance. The surrounding landscape was just as important. Johnson meticulously designed the grounds as though they were an outdoor museum. Paths curved deliberately, trees were planted with intention, and sculptures dotted the lawns. The result was that the glass house wasn't really just one building. It was part of a sprawling 49-acre campus of art, design, and nature. This raised another controversy. Is a house still a house if it's meant more for show than for living? Detractors called it a theater of ego, where Johnson used art and architecture to impress visitors rather than to create a livable space. Supporters countered that all great architecture balances practicality with symbolism, and the glass house simply leaned harder into the symbolic. One thing is clear: Johnson succeeded in making people talk. Decades later, the house is still a magnet for debate. Today, the glass house is a museum open to the public. Thousands visit each year, stepping into Johnson's transparent world. Many leave inspired. Others leave baffled, wondering why a glorified greenhouse is considered one of America's most important modern homes. Its legacy is undeniable. Countless architects have cited it as inspiration. Entire schools of design grew from its minimalist philosophy, yet the criticism never disappeared. Detractors argue that the glass house represents elitism, architecture for the wealthy few, disconnected from the needs of ordinary people. After all, who else could afford to live in a glass box, safe from crime, poverty, or prying neighbors? Even Johnson himself remains a controversial figure. His early political ties, his reputation for copying others, and his unapologetic ego all make him a difficult hero. And yet, without him, modern American architecture would look very different. The glass house forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Is architecture about beauty or about function? Do we build for comfort or for ideas? And is it possible that a house can be both genius and absurd at the same time? The glass house in Connecticut is more than a building. It's a mirror, reflecting not just the landscape around it, but our own values about art, privacy, and the meaning of home. To some, it's a temple of transparency, a bold declaration that walls are lies and honesty is everything. To others, it's a cage of ego, proof that even the most brilliant ideas can collapse when confronted with basic human needs. Maybe that's why it's still relevant today. In an age where social media already puts our lives on display, the glass house feels strangely prophetic. Philip Johnson may have been asking the same question we're all asking now. How much of ourselves should we let the world see? So, what do you think? Is the glass house a stroke of genius, or just a stunt wrapped in glass? The glass house in Connecticut is more than a building. It's a mirror, reflecting not just the landscape around it, but our own values about art, privacy, and the meaning of home. To some, it's a temple of transparency, a bold declaration that walls are lies and honesty is everything. To others, it's a cage of ego, proof that even the most brilliant ideas can collapse when confronted with basic human needs. Maybe that's why it's still relevant today. In an age where social media already puts our lives on display, the glass house feels strangely prophetic. Philip Johnson may have been asking the same question we're all asking now. How much of ourselves should we let the world see? And here's the uncomfortable twist. Even Johnson himself couldn't fully live by his philosophy. While he showcased his life in glass, he quietly built a private brick bunker just steps away. The same man who declared that a wall is a lie still needed walls when the performance ended. Doesn't that sound familiar? We post our curated lives online, but behind the screen we keep secrets, flaws, and truths hidden. The glass house is Instagram before Instagram, a perfectly staged version of reality that hides more than it reveals. Psychologists argue that humans are not built for complete exposure. Privacy isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity for mental health. In a house with no walls, your brain never shuts off. You're always on display. And in many ways, isn't that exactly what's happening to all of us now? Constant surveillance cameras, online algorithms watching every click, people measuring self-worth by likes, shares, and followers. The digital world has turned our lives into one big glass house. And yet, there's beauty in it too. The glass house forces us to confront vulnerability. It strips away the illusion of control. It dares us to ask, can truth, art, and openness ever outweigh comfort and safety? That question is why critics still fight about the building to this day. Maybe the real genius of the glass house isn't its design, but its contradiction. It shows us that we crave openness and privacy at the same time, and we can never fully reconcile the two. It reminds us that architecture isn't just about walls and roofs, but about philosophy, psychology, and even politics. So here's the challenge. Is the glass house the boldest home of the 20th century or the most unlivable? Was Philip Johnson a prophet ahead of his time, or simply a wealthy man playing games with glass and steel? One thing is certain. The glass house still speaks to us because it isn't really about architecture at all. It's about us. So what do you think? Is the glass house a masterpiece of radical honesty, a prophetic